Flying was supposed to be simple. You take off, you trust your co-pilot, and you land safely. That's it. I was Evan Brooks, 32, commercial pilot for Pacific Sky Airways. Confident, controlled, and known for never letting emotions get in the way. But that changed when the airline assigned me a new co-pilot, Adrian Hale. You could tell from the first handshake he was different. Calm voice, sharp mind, eyes like the kind of sky you only see above the clouds. At first, it was just routine. Flight plans, safety checks, long hours in the cockpit. But somewhere between the turbulence and the silence, something started to shift until one night over the Atlantic, when a storm hit, and what he told me at 37,000 feet changed everything I thought I knew about loyalty, love, and what it means to fall. If you believe that sometimes the most dangerous journeys don't happen in the sky, they happen inside the heart. Stay until the end. Flying was supposed to be predictable. Procedures, checklists, control. Every switch had a purpose. Every second mattered. I built my entire career on that sense of control. The kind that keeps you safe when there's 30,000 feet of nothing below you. That's why I didn't like surprises. And that's exactly what Adrian Hale was. The first time I saw him was in the crew briefing room at LAX, the morning light cutting through the blinds, catching the faint gold in his hair. He stood by the window, uniform crisp, posture straight. Calm, composed, almost too composed. Captain Brooks, the flight coordinator, said, "This is your new co-pilot. Hale's transferring from the European division. He'll be shadowing you for the next 3 weeks. Shadowing, I repeated, shaking his hand. His grip was firm, confident. His eyes met mine and stayed there, steady, unflinching. "Looking forward to learning from you, sir," he said. His voice was low, even, professional. But there was something in it, warmth, maybe curiosity. That made me pause. "Let's hope I'm worth learning from," I said, trying to sound detached. He smiled slightly. "I have a feeling you are." We took off that afternoon. Flight 207, LAX to Chicago. The cockpit always felt like home to me. The quiet hum of systems, the muted chatter of ATC, the clean smell of jet fuel and steel. But that day, the air felt different. Adrian sat to my right, headset on, eyes flicking across the instruments with precision. He wasn't just competent, he was instinctive. The kind of pilot who didn't just follow checklists. He felt the plane, cruising at 34,000 feet, he said. "Weather looks clean all the way to Illinois." "Copy that," I replied, glancing sideways. His focus didn't waver. For a while, it was just the rhythm of flight, altitude, heading, radio chatter. But somewhere over Colorado, during a long stretch of calm, he leaned back slightly. "Mind if I ask you something, Captain?" "Depends. Why do you still fly commercial? With your flight record, you could have gone private or military." I shrugged. "I like order, structure. The rules keep things from falling apart," he smiled faintly. "You sound like someone who's afraid of chaos." "I'm a pilot," I said. "Chaos gets people killed." "Maybe," he said softly. "But sometimes chaos is just life showing you what really matters." I turned my head toward him, about to respond, but stopped. He wasn't looking at the instruments anymore. He was looking straight at me. And for the briefest second, I forgot to breathe. We landed in Chicago right on schedule. Smooth descent, flawless execution, but my hands were tense on the controls and I couldn't explain why. When we parked at the gate, Adrian turned to me and said, "Good flight, Captain. You're even better than your record says." I smirked. "Flattery won't get you a promotion." He grinned, unbuckling his harness. I wasn't aiming for one. Before I could respond, he was gone, the scent of his cologne lingering like a challenge. Over the next few days, he was everywhere. Same crew briefings, same flight schedules, same quiet smile that made every silence feel like it meant something. We started to fall into rhythm, not just as pilots, but as something else. I'd catch him watching me during pre-flight checks, expression unreadable. And I wasn't innocent either. The more I tried to ignore it, the worse it got. During one late-night flight from San Francisco to Miami, the passengers asleep, cabin lights dim, he asked, "You ever feel like you're running from something, Captain?" "Every pilot's running from gravity," I said dryly. He chuckled. That's not what I meant. I didn't answer. He continued. Back in London, there was a captain I worked under. Brilliant flyer, married, 2 kids. Everyone thought he had the perfect life. Then one night he grounded himself mid-shift. Just walked off the plane. Why? Adrian's voice softened. He said he realized he'd been living someone else's life, pretending it fit. I stared at the glowing instruments in front of me. And you think that's what I'm doing? He didn't look at me, but I could hear the smile in his voice. I didn't say that. The silence that followed was heavier than turbulence. We landed in Miami just before dawn. The air was thick with humidity, the tarmac glowing orange under the rising sun. As we walked toward the crew terminal, he said, "You free for coffee?" I hesitated. "We're supposed to rest before the next leg." He nodded, adjusting his tie. "Right, of course. Always the rules. That should have been the end of it." But hours later, as I sat alone in the pilot's lounge, he walked in, 2 cups in hand. "You left this on the checklist," he said, setting one in front of me. "What's that?" He smiled. "Relaxation." I took the cup, feeling the warmth through the paper. "You always this persistent?" "Only when something feels right," he said quietly. The words hung there uninvited, but impossible to ignore. Later that day, during our return flight to Los Angeles, I could tell something was off. Adrian was quieter than usual, distracted. He kept checking his watch, staring out the window. "You good?" I asked. "Yeah," he said quickly. "Just thinking." "About?" He hesitated. "About whether I should tell you something." I turned to look at him. "We're 30,000 feet in the air. Not many secrets up here." He met my eyes. "You'd be surprised." Before I could ask what he meant, a sudden jolt shook the cockpit. Turbulence, violent and unexpected. "Storm cell ahead," he shouted, scanning the radar. "Divert heading to 270, I ordered. The plane rocked again, lightning flashing outside. The passengers gasped from the cabin. "Autopilot off," I said, gripping the yoke. "We'll fly manual." He nodded, focused. For 10 long minutes we fought through the storm, both hands steady. Every second a battle against the wind. When we finally broke through the clouds, the sky opened, a calm, endless expanse of blue. I exhaled, muscles shaking. "Nice work." He looked at me, sweat on his temple, eyes wide, voice trembling slightly. "Evan," he said quietly, "there's something I need to tell you." I turned to face him. "What is it?" He hesitated, swallowing hard. Then, barely above a whisper, he said, "That storm wasn't the only thing I've been fighting." For a moment I thought I'd misheard him. The engines hummed softly beneath us, the autopilot steady, the sky ahead calm again, yet something in Adrian's voice made my pulse skip. "That storm wasn't the only thing I've been fighting," he said again. Quieter this time, his hands still resting on the throttle. I studied him. His jaw was tight, eyes fixed forward, like he was afraid to move. "Adrian," I said carefully, "if you're dealing with something medical—" He shook his head. "It's not that." "Then what is it?" He hesitated, searching for words. "It's something I've been hiding. From the airline. From everyone." I frowned. "That's a dangerous sentence to say to your captain." He gave a faint, bitter smile. "Yeah, I know." The intercom crackled with routine cabin chatter, but neither of us moved to respond. Finally, I said, "We'll talk about it after we land." He turned to me, his expression unreadable. That's what I was afraid of. We didn't speak again for the rest of the flight. When we landed in Los Angeles, everything felt mechanical. Taxi to gate, power down, disarm doors. Crew release, routine. Except for the silence. He signed the logbook, handed me my copy and said only, "See you tomorrow, Captain." But I knew he wouldn't sleep that night. Neither would I. The next morning I got a call from operations. "Captain Brooks, there's been a crew adjustment. You'll be flying to Seattle with Officer Hale again." I almost asked for a change. Almost. Instead, I said, "Confirmed." When I arrived at the terminal, Adrian was already there, standing by the window, watching the rain streak across the tarmac. He turned when he heard me. "Morning?" "Morning," I said, pretending nothing had changed. We boarded in silence. The cabin crew exchanged glances. They could sense the tension, but didn't dare comment. Once we reached cruising altitude, I broke the silence. "You wanted to tell me something yesterday." He exhaled slowly. "Yeah, So tell me, he looked at me for a long time, then said softly, you ever get tired of pretending to be someone you're not? The question hit harder than I expected. That depends who's asking. Someone who's done it for too long, he said. I didn't respond. Not yet, he continued. When I joined the airline, I told myself I'd stay invisible, fly, work, keep my head down. But somewhere along the way, that turned into lying about who I am. His fingers drummed on the control panel, nervous, rhythmic. I swallowed. You're saying you're gay? He nodded once. And I'm saying that for the first time to anyone who wears this uniform. The hum of the engines filled the space between us. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to reach out, to tell him it didn't change a thing. Another part of me, the part trained to follow rules, told me to stay silent. He laughed quietly, bitterly. That's the reaction I was afraid of. Adrian, relax, Captain, he said. I'm not confessing because I expect something. I just needed to stop lying every time someone asked about my life. His voice trembled slightly at the edges. I wanted to say something, but all that came out was, you picked the worst co-pilot to tell. He looked up sharply. Why? Because I'm not as straight as everyone thinks either. The words slipped out before I could stop them. He froze, searching my face for a lie. What did you just say? I said you're not the only one pretending. Silence, heavy, electric. Then he whispered, you could lose everything if people find out. So could you. He smiled faintly. Guess that makes us equally reckless. I turned back toward the sky ahead. The clouds had thinned, sunlight breaking through in golden streaks. You realize we're having this conversation while flying 200 passengers across the Pacific? He grinned. Guess I finally found a place where no one can overhear us. We landed in Seattle under a light drizzle. The passengers disembarked, the crew left, and the world went quiet again. As we shut down the cockpit systems, he said, you don't have to say anything more. I stood, removing my headset. You took a risk telling me that. The least I can do is not make you regret it. He looked at me then, not with fear, but something else. Relief, gratitude, maybe even trust. Thanks, he said softly. Don't thank me yet, I replied. I'm still figuring out what this means, he smiled. Same here. That night, after check-in, the airline booked us both at the same hotel. Standard procedure for crew. 2 separate rooms, same floor, but I couldn't sleep. The sound of rain against the window felt too much like everything I wasn't saying. At 11:47 p.m., there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find Adrian standing there, barefoot in a t-shirt and sweatpants. His hair still damp from a shower. He looked nervous, eyes darting down the hallway. Can I come in? I hesitated for a second, then stepped aside. He walked in quietly, pacing once before turning toward me. I didn't mean to mess things up between us. You didn't, I said. I did. You're my captain. I crossed a line. Lines move, I said quietly. He stopped pacing. Do they? Sometimes, I said. When you realize what's on the other side. He stared at me, eyes dark, intense, uncertain. For a moment, neither of us moved. The only sound was the rain tapping against the glass. Then he took a step closer. Evan, yeah? Tell me I'm not imagining this. I didn't answer. I didn't have to, because the next second I was pulling him in, and the world outside disappeared into rain and silence. When you fly for a living, you learn to keep secrets in the air. Passengers think they can sense tension in a cockpit, but they can't. They see calm professionalism, routine smiles and voices steady as autopilot. What they don't see are the things simmering beneath, the looks, the words, the moments that should never happen, 30,000 feet above the ground. After that night in Seattle, everything changed between Adrian and me. We didn't talk about it. We didn't need to. The silence said enough. The way he looked at me before each flight, the way his hand brushed mine during takeoff checks, it all said more than words could. But what happens in the sky always finds a way to fall back to Earth. Our next assignment was a long haul. Los Angeles to Tokyo, 14 hours in the air. Shared cockpit, rotating rest schedules. Too much time to think and too little space to hide. The morning of the flight, as we stood by the gate, Adrian looked tired, eyes slightly red, voice quieter than usual. "Rough night?" I asked. He smiled faintly. "Didn't sleep much." "Me neither." He met my gaze for a moment, the kind that lingers longer than it should, before turning to greet the flight attendants. We boarded, pre-flight checklists done with practiced rhythm. But every time our shoulders brushed, it was like a spark neither of us could ignore. Once the passengers settled, I scanned the manifest. "Seat 4A, Holmes Victor." The name made me pause. "Problem?" Adrian asked. "No," I lied. "Just a familiar name." 10 minutes before takeoff, a man in an expensive grey suit stepped into the cockpit. "Captain Brooks?" he said smoothly. "Airline security liaison. Just here for observation." He flashed an ID, but I already knew the face. Victor Holmes, retired pilot, now working as an internal compliance officer. Known for his sharp eyes and his love for catching mistakes. He'd flown with me years ago and never liked me. I forced a smile. "Always a pleasure, sir," he smirked. "Likewise. I'll be in 4A if you need me." When he left, Adrian raised an eyebrow. "He's observing us?" "Apparently. That's not stressful at all," he said dryly. I chuckled, but something in my gut told me this wasn't random. Holmes didn't observe flights, he investigated them. We took off at sunrise, the Pacific glittering below. Once we reached cruising altitude, Adrian handled the controls while I filled out the flight log. "Coffee?" he asked, breaking the silence. "Please." He poured 2 cups from the thermos, handing me one. Our fingers brushed, too long, too deliberate. He smiled, then looked away. From behind the cockpit door I heard footsteps. A knock followed. "Captain," came a voice. "Holmes, mind if I step in for a quick chat?" I sighed quietly. "Come in." The door opened and Holmes leaned in, eyes flicking between the two of us. "Just checking on the crew." "Everything's smooth," I said. He nodded slowly. "Good to hear. You two seem well coordinated." There was an edge to his tone, subtle but sharp. Adrian smiled politely. "We've flown several routes together now. Good communication makes good flights." Holmes's eyes narrowed, lingering a second too long on Adrian's hand near the throttle. "Yes, communication. Vital in all partnerships." He left, but the look he gave me before closing the door sent a chill down my spine. Adrian glanced at me. "What was that about?" "He suspects something," I said quietly. "Of what?" I hesitated. "Of us." He leaned back in his seat, exhaling. "Then we keep our distance." "Easier said than done," I muttered. Hours passed. The sun fell, the ocean below turning into endless darkness. The passengers slept. The cabin lights dimmed to soft gold. Adrian had the controls, while I rested in the jump seat behind him, pretending to sleep. I watched him, the way his hands moved on the yoke, the way his jaw tightened when he focused. I remembered his words from the night before. Lines move when you realize what's on the other side. But some lines don't move. They wait for you to cross them, and then they break. Around hour 9, turbulence hit. Nothing major, but enough to shake the plane. "Seatbelt sign on," Adrian said, adjusting altitude. The cockpit lights flickered briefly. He checked the systems. Everything normal. Then he frowned. "What is it?" I asked. "Cabin pressure readings off." "Slight leak warning." I scanned the indicators. He was right. It wasn't critical, but we needed to inform the crew. "Call the chief flight attendant," I said. He nodded, reaching for the phone. But before he could dial, the cockpit door buzzed again. "Not now," I said, assuming it was a crew member. The door opened anyway. Holmes stood there, holding a clipboard. "Everything okay, gentlemen?" he asked calmly. Adrian turned, startled. "We're in a small turbulence pocket, sir. Please take your seat." Holmes didn't move. "Relax, Officer Hale. Just making sure protocol's followed." "Pressure anomaly, isn't it?" My pulse spiked. "How do you know that?" He smiled thinly. "Because I monitor these flights remotely. And because you've been making unusual choices lately, Captain." "What choices?" I said sharply. "The kind that compromise professionalism," he said, glancing at Adrian again. "Out," I said, standing. "Now." He didn't budge. "You think I don't see it?" The looks, the extra time logged in cockpit reports. "You think nobody notices?" "Mr. Holmes," Adrian said carefully, "you're out of line." Holmes's smirk widened. Funny. That's exactly what you two are. Before I could respond, the plane jolted violently, a sudden downdraft slamming us downward. Alarms blared, autopilot disengaged. Adrian shouted, "Take manual!" I ordered, gripping the controls. Holmes stumbled back, grabbing the doorframe. For 30 seconds, everything was chaos, the roar of wind, the shaking metal. The red glow of warning lights. "Stabilizers responding," Adrian said. "Altitude recovering." We leveled out, hearts pounding. Silence returned, except for the hum of the engines and the alarm resetting itself. I turned to Holmes, who looked pale. "You done observing?" I said coldly. He straightened his tie. "You'll both be hearing from headquarters." Then he left. When the door shut, Adrian sat back breathless. "You think he'll report us?" I nodded. "He doesn't even need proof. Just suspicion." Adrian stared at the horizon, the faint edge of dawn rising over the Pacific. "Then I guess the flight that changed everything," he said quietly, "just landed us in more trouble than we can handle." I looked at him, the sky glowing gold on his face, and said, "Maybe, but we're still flying." He smiled faintly. "For now." And as the sun rose, painting the clouds in fire, I couldn't help but wonder which would hit us first, the truth or the ground. The moment we landed in Tokyo, I knew something was wrong. Usually, the arrival gate buzzed with motion, passengers stretching, crew laughing, the subtle relief of another safe flight completed. But this time, when the seatbelt sign went off, 2 uniformed security officers were already waiting by the cockpit door. They weren't from airport customs. They were corporate investigators. "Captain Brooks, Officer Hale," one of them said. "You're requested immediately in the operations office." "Airline directive." Adrian and I exchanged a quick glance. Neither of us asked why. We already knew. Holmes had wasted no time. The room they took us to was cold and windowless, the kind of place designed to make you feel smaller. On one side sat Holmes, his grey suit still immaculate. Across from him, a woman with sharp features and a voice that could cut glass introduced herself as Marla Dean. "Head of Corporate Compliance, gentlemen," she began, folding her hands. "There's been a report of unprofessional conduct between flight crew members." Adrian sat upright, jaw tight. "Unprofessional how?" Holmes smiled faintly. "Personal involvement that compromises cockpit integrity." I kept my voice even. "That's a serious accusation." "It is," Marla agreed, "which is why we're conducting an internal review. Both of you will be grounded until further notice." Adrian's hands clenched in his lap. "Grounded? For what?" Holmes leaned forward. "For creating the appearance of impropriety. You two share rooms on layovers, spend unusual off-duty hours together, and your recent cockpit footage shows multiple breaches of procedural decorum." "Breaches?" I repeated. He smirked. "Unnecessary physical proximity, excessive eye contact, whispered communication outside of radio protocol." I almost laughed until I realized he wasn't exaggerating. Adrian said quietly, "You were watching us." Holmes didn't deny it. "Observation ensures discipline, Officer Hale, especially when emotions start interfering with duty." After the meeting, they confiscated our flight badges and scheduled individual interviews for the following morning. We left the office in silence, walking through Narita's sterile corridors like ghosts. Outside, the city glowed beneath us. Neon, rain, reflections on wet asphalt. Tokyo was alive, beautiful, and utterly indifferent to what was happening in my chest. Adrian stopped near a vending machine, running a hand through his hair. "So that's it? They destroy our careers over rumors?" I exhaled. "Rumors don't matter when someone like Holmes is feeding them. He's not after truth, he's after control." He looked at me, eyes dark. "And what are we supposed to do? Wait for them to call it off?" He shook his head. "You still think logic fixes everything, don't you? It's worked so far." "Not this time," he said. "Not when the thing they're afraid of is us." That night at the hotel, I couldn't sleep. The rain outside had turned into a full storm, hammering against the windows, like the sky itself was angry. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my flight jacket draped over the chair. The wings pinned to it caught the dim light, a symbol I'd spent my life earning. a symbol that suddenly felt meaningless. There was a knock. Adrian stood in the doorway, barefoot, wearing the same expression I'd seen during turbulence, controlled fear. "I couldn't stay in my room," he said softly. "Mind if I come in?" I nodded. He sat on the bed beside me, quiet for a while. Then, almost in a whisper, "Do you regret it?" I turned to him. "Regret what?" "Letting this happen. Letting me happen." My throat tightened. "No," he exhaled, a fragile sound. "Even if it costs us everything? Some things are worth the cost." He looked at me, searching, desperate. "Evan, I don't want to lose this. But I can't lose flying either." "You won't," I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. He smiled sadly. "You still think you can control the storm?" "Maybe not," I said, "but I can fly through it." He laughed softly, shaking his head. "You and your metaphors," I smiled. "Occupational hazard." He hesitated, then rested his hand over mine. "Whatever happens tomorrow, I just want you to know this wasn't a mistake for me." I turned my hand, fingers lacing with his. "Then it wasn't one for me either." For a long moment, neither of us moved. Outside, thunder rolled, distant, heavy, like the sky warning us that calm never lasts. The next morning they separated us. Adrian went in first. I waited outside the conference room, every minute dragging like an hour. When he finally came out, his face was unreadable. "They asked about everything," he said quietly. "Where we stayed. Who we talked to. If there was anything between us. What did you say?" I told them the truth. "That I respect you. That you've been nothing but professional." I nodded, but I could see it in his eyes. He was terrified. Then it was my turn. Inside, Holmes sat with that same smug expression. Marla spoke first. "Captain Brooks, you've served with distinction for over a decade. Why jeopardize that reputation now?" "I haven't," I said calmly. "We've done nothing to compromise flight safety." Holmes leaned back. "Maybe not in the air. But your emotions affect your judgment. I've seen it. The way you look at him. That's not how a captain looks at a subordinate." "Maybe not," I said. "But it's how one human being looks at another when he refuses to lie anymore." The room went silent. Marla's eyes flicked toward Holmes. "We'll take your statements under review. You're both suspended until further notice." And just like that, it was over. Outside, I found Adrian waiting. His eyes met mine, and for the first time he didn't look scared. He looked defiant. "So we wait," I said. He shook his head. "No, we fight." "Fight how?" He pulled something from his jacket pocket, a small flash drive. "What's that?" "Flight data recorder copy," he said. "From the Tokyo flight. It proves we followed every protocol. No mistakes, no unprofessional conduct." I frowned. "How did you—" "I may have borrowed access before they locked our accounts." I stared at him. "That's a dangerous move." He smiled faintly. "So is flying through storms." We stood outside the terminal, the early morning sun breaking through the clouds. The storm was clearing, but I knew another was waiting back home. Adrian looked at me, determination hardening his voice. "They want to ground us, let them try. But they can't erase the truth." I nodded slowly. "Then we take this all the way." He extended his hand, palm open, steady. "Together?" I clasped it. Together. For the first time in days, the sky looked clear, but we both knew clarity doesn't mean safety. It just means you can finally see the next storm coming. When we landed back in Los Angeles, the world felt heavier. There was no welcome committee, no polite debrief. Just two security officers waiting by the jet bridge, holding sealed envelopes. Captain Brooks, Officer Hale. They handed us suspension letters, stamped with the airline's crest. "Pending formal review for misconduct." It didn't say what kind of misconduct, but it didn't have to. The rumor had already left the ground long before we did. The days that followed felt endless. We weren't allowed near the hangars, our IDs disabled, our names quietly removed from the flight rosters. Every time my phone buzzed, I expected it to be headquarters with a final verdict. Instead, it was silence. Adrian called one evening. "They've started interviewing the crew from Tokyo, flight attendants, mechanics, even the gate staff." I leaned against the window, watching planes take off one after another, their engines glowing orange against the dusk. They're building a case. Against who? He asked. I didn't answer. We both knew the truth. Holmes was after me. By the end of the week, we were summoned to appear before the Flight Conduct Review Board, the final step before termination. When we walked into the building, it felt like walking into a courtroom without a jury, a long glass table, 6 board members, and at the center, Holmes, smirking like a man who'd already won. Marla Dean opened the hearing. Captain Brooks, Officer Hale, you're both accused of engaging in conduct unbecoming of airline officers, compromising professionalism and integrity during active service. Adrian spoke first. Those are heavy words for unproven claims. Holmes turned toward him. Then prove me wrong, officer. Tell us why your cockpit recordings show long periods of off-script conversation, why your hotel logs show overlapping room access, why maintenance staff found you both lingering in restricted areas after flights. Because we were debriefing flight performance, Adrian said. Holmes raised an eyebrow. And that required candlelight? Murmurs rippled across the table. I clenched my fists. You've crossed a line, Victor. I'm enforcing one, he said coolly. You let your emotions take control up there. You endangered everyone on that flight, whether you realize it or not. That's a lie, I said sharply. We followed every checklist. We flew clean. Adrian pulled the flash drive from his pocket and set it on the table. This has the black box copy. You'll hear exactly how clean, Holmes laughed. Stolen data? That's your defense. Marla gestured for quiet. Play it. The recording began. The hum of engines. Adrian's steady voice reading coordinates. My confirmations. Then the turbulence. Commands, checklists, coordinated adjustments, all perfectly executed. When it ended, the room was silent. Marla turned to Holmes. I don't hear anything compromising. Holmes shifted in his seat. Listen closer. The tone, the subtext. They're human? Adrian interrupted. Because that's all we were. 2 pilots doing our job, under pressure, in a storm. Holmes's jaw tightened. Marla leaned forward. Until this moment, there's been no physical or verbal proof of misconduct. What we do have is a flawless flight record and 2 highly rated officers. Holmes stood abruptly. You can't ignore what's obvious. Look at them. Look at how they sit together. This is a cover-up. Enough, Marla said sharply. This is an airline, not a morality tribunal. Holmes's voice rose. You'll regret this. You'll all regret protecting them. He stormed out, leaving the room in stunned silence. When the board dismissed us, Adrian and I stepped outside into the bright California sunlight. For the first time in weeks, it felt like we could breathe. They believed us, he said quietly. Maybe, I said. But that doesn't mean this is over. He frowned. You think he'll keep coming? Holmes doesn't lose gracefully. That night, I found an email waiting in my inbox. Subject, Captain Brooks, confidential matter, the sender Victor Holmes. I hesitated before opening it. You can still save yourself, Evan. Walk away from Hale, distance yourself publicly. I'll recommend reinstatement and make this disappear. Otherwise, I'll release footage that proves everything. I stared at the screen, heart hammering. There was no footage, at least none that showed anything intimate. But he didn't need proof. A single edit, a rumor, a shadow of suggestion. It would be enough to destroy us. I called Adrian immediately. He's threatening blackmail, I said. He was silent for a moment. Then we stopped running. What do you mean? Meet me at the hangar, he said. There's something you need to see. When I arrived, the hangar was dim and echoing, the smell of fuel and metal heavy in the air. Adrian stood beside one of the grounded aircraft, his phone in hand. He hit play on a recording. Holmes's voice filled the space, low, arrogant, unmistakable. I don't care what it takes. I'll ruin them both. The airline can't afford a scandal about 2 male pilots. I stared at the phone, stunned. Where did you get that? Security cameras, he said. Maintenance chief owed me a favor. It was damning. Not just against Holmes, against the entire system that had protected him. Adrian, I said slowly, this could end his career. He met my eyes. Or save ours. We took the recording to Marla the next morning. When she heard it, she went pale. This can't leave this room, she said. It already has, Adrian replied. We sent it to the union and the media department. For once, Marla didn't argue. She just nodded, defeated. Then I suppose you've both earned your wings back. A week later, Holmes resigned. Personal reasons, the memo said. The investigation was quietly closed. No apology, no acknowledgement, just silence. But silence this time. Felt like freedom. When the airline reinstated us, they offered separate assignments, different routes, different bases. Adrian declined. I'll transfer to Denver, he said. Fresh start. My chest tightened. You're leaving, he nodded. It's better this way. We can't keep flying together, Evan, not after everything. I looked at him, the man who'd changed everything, the man I'd risked everything for, and said, maybe you're right. But I'm not sorry, he smiled, eyes glimmering. Me neither. He walked away that day, uniform pressed, head high. And as I watched him disappear into the crowd of travelers, I realized something. Some flights don't need to end with a landing. Some just need to take off once to change your life forever. 3 months passed before I saw him again. 3 months of empty skies. They reinstated my license, gave me back my uniform, my badge, my roots, everything but the one thing that made flying feel like something more than a job. Every morning, I walked through the airport in silence, passing strangers who had no idea what it cost to wear these wings. To them, a pilot's life looked simple. Take off, land, smile for the passengers. But what they didn't see was the loneliness between flights, the weight of secrets, the way the clouds could feel like both escape and prison. I told myself I was fine, that what happened between me and Adrian was part of another life. But the truth followed me, like the hum of engines that never really fades. It was early December when the email came through. The subject, crew assignment update. Pacific Sky 418, Los Angeles to Denver. My next co-pilot, A. Hale. I stared at the screen for a full minute. My pulse kicked up. I hadn't said his name aloud in months, hadn't dared to wonder where he'd gone, and now we were flying together again. The morning of the flight, the air was cold and clear. I arrived early, pacing the tarmac, pretending I was checking the aircraft when really I was stalling. Then I saw him. Adrian walked toward me across the runway, wool cap tucked under his arm, that same calm posture, but something was different. He looked lighter, freer, Captain, he said with a small smile. Officer Hale. We both stood there, caught between professionalism and everything we weren't supposed to feel. It's been a while, I said. Too long, he replied. For a moment, we just looked at each other, not like pilots, not like colleagues, but like two men who'd been through hell and somehow survived. Once inside the cockpit, everything felt achingly familiar. The low hum of electronics, the soft glow of the instruments, the distant murmur of boarding passengers. Pre-flight checklist, I said, trying to sound casual. He nodded. Fuel pumps on. Engine start. Confirmed. Our voices overlapped just like they used to. The rhythm was there, the unspoken trust, the quiet pulse of something stronger than rules. Halfway through the checklist, he glanced at me. You look good, Evan, I smirked. Trying to distract the captain. He laughed softly. Would it work? Maybe, I said, eyes on the gauges. But don't push it. We took off just after sunrise. The light flooded the cockpit in gold, the clouds below soft as silk. For a while it was pure silence, the kind only pilots know, the kind that feels like peace. Then he said quietly, You heard about Holmes? Retired, apparently, I said. No one knows where he went. Good, Adrian said. He doesn't deserve to be anywhere near the sky. I nodded, watching the horizon stretch forever ahead of us. After a moment he added, You know, I thought I'd miss it. The danger, the tension. But it turns out I just missed this. The quiet, the way you fly. I looked over. The way I fly? He smiled. Like you're trying to outrun something. I wanted to tell him he was wrong. But he wasn't. We reached cruising altitude, the cabin calm, the autopilot steady. I leaned back, exhaling. So Denver treating you well? Better than I expected, he said. Different kind of peace. I teach now, new recruits, flight simulation. Really? He nodded. Less flying, more grounding. I grinned. Never thought I'd hear you say that. He chuckled. Me neither. Then after a pause, you ever think about quitting? Every day, I admitted. But the truth is, the only place I ever feel like myself is up here. He nodded. Same. Our eyes met again, not out of tension, not out of longing, but something gentler. Understanding. Hours later, we began our descent. The radio crackled with instructions. Denver below was blanketed in snow, runway lights flickering through the haze. Wind shear reported near the approach, Adrian said, scanning the radar. Got it. Keep monitoring. The turbulence hit hard, rougher than expected. The plane jolted. The passengers gasped. Autopilot disengage, I ordered. Manual control, Adrian confirmed. Hands firm on the yoke. We guided the aircraft down together, side by side, our movements perfectly synchronized, one steady breath, one shared rhythm. When the wheels finally touched the runway, the entire cabin erupted in applause. Adrian exhaled, grinning. Still got it, I laughed, relief flooding my chest. You never lost it. After the flight, as the passengers disembarked, the world outside was quiet, snow falling softly over the runway lights. We stood at the foot of the stairs, watching the flakes catch in the wind. Adrian turned to me. Do you ever wonder what it would have been like if none of this had happened? Every day, I said. He nodded, then smiled faintly. And I wouldn't change it. He studied my face for a moment, then stepped closer, just enough for his voice to drop. You still hide it well, you know. The fear, I swallowed. What fear? That one day you'll let go and fall. I looked out at the snow. Maybe that's what flying is. Falling, but pretending it's control. He smiled sadly. Then I guess I fell a long time ago. We walked back toward the terminal, boots crunching in the snow. He stopped by the gate, turning to me. This was my last flight, he said quietly. I froze. What? I got an offer. Flight Safety Division. Ground operations. No more routes. I stared at him. So this is it? He nodded. For me, yeah, but you belong up there, Evan. My chest tightened. And you don't? He smiled. I used to, but maybe now I just want to stop running from the ground. I wanted to say something, anything, but all that came out was, then let me be the one to land this time. He laughed softly. You already did. Then he reached out, pressed something into my hand, a small silver pilot pin. Keep this. I won't need it anymore, Adrian. He shook his head. Don't, just fly. And with that, he walked away, disappearing into the crowd, the sound of his footsteps fading under the hum of departing planes. That night, I stood on my balcony, watching the sky glow with distant aircraft lights. I touched the pin in my hand, feeling its cold weight. Somewhere out there, he was starting over. And maybe, in some way, so was I, because for the first time in years, I understood what flight really meant. It wasn't about control. It wasn't about running. It was about letting go and trusting that somehow you'll find your way back to the sky. Love, like flying, isn't about avoiding turbulence. It's about holding steady when everything shakes. Maybe the sky didn't break us. Maybe it just revealed who we already were. Because sometimes the bravest thing a man can do isn't to fly higher. It's to land where his heart finally feels safe. If this story moved you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because every love story, no matter how high it flies, deserves to be remembered when it lands.